YouTube, what is good? It's your man Ribs from Doing Film Things. Every single week I drop a new video about film photography, so if that's your thing, definitely go ahead and subscribe. This week we're doing some more darkroom printing. It's gonna be special though. This week I am printing some 600nm from Revolog films. This is a specialty film with special effects on it, and basically when you use this film and take your average exposure, you get a bluish reddish tint on your images depending on the shadows and the highlights. It's very interesting. It kind of takes a normal photo and gives you what you expect to see from a color perspective, but then it kind of has an effect layered on top. So you can still see the original color, but then you also see this really interesting effect. I really enjoyed shooting this film, and I actually did a spin around my hometown in New York City, Uptown, Washington Heights. And I just kind of walked around in a really, really hot summer day. This was back in July when I was back in the US. So I took a bunch of photos and I really liked what I got. And at one specific point during that walk, I actually came across a big group of motorcycle heads. So there was a bunch of dirt bikes and ATVs and that kind of thing. And they just ride around the streets, making some noise and getting some attention. So they happened to pull up right on the corner where I was standing, and I took a bunch of photos and they noticed me and kind of started posing. So it was really cool. It was nice to kind of interact with them and just get some really cool images. So one of those is actually one of my favorite images from the roll, and I decided to print that one. I've never printed any special effects film, so I'm really curious to see how this behaves in the darkroom. Quick plug, I am dropping my color darkroom printing guide. Basically captures all of the knowledge that I've gained from doing darkroom printing at home. This is tailored for beginners and for people looking to set up kind of a scrappy darkroom in their home. So if you're interested in that, definitely check out this link up here once it drops and, give me some support. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the darkroom.
What's up, y'all? So I basically am doing full sheet exposures because since I'm doing such a big print, a little test strip just isn't going to give you enough information about the colors and all the different parts of the image. So I'm going to do a whole sheet of paper and I put it kind of right in the middle so I can capture the majority of the image. So I already did that. Did a 15 and 20 second final exposure. That way I can see exactly what's needed. When you have your enlarger all the way up like this for a big print, you're going to need a lot more time for exposure. The settings are not going to be the same as if you had an exposure for a smaller 8x10 print versus the 12x16, which is what I'm doing now. So anyways, you want to set your exposure and do everything as if you're doing the big print, even though you're only doing a test print right now. So I'm going to develop this and then we'll see what it looks like. I don't really know. I haven't done a big print in a while. So it's interesting. Basically, this print is extremely kind of strange color, and that's because it is special effect film, so you're not going to get normal colors regardless. However, I know that orange that you see up there is very, very strong. So I'm going to remove a decent bit of that orange in my next test print, and then that'll get us closer to that kind of like hazy, like purpley, it's a soft effect. It's not a very aggressive effect. So my changes in settings didn't really do much. Honestly, I only took off 10 points on my enlarger from both yellow and magenta. And by take off, I mean I filtered additionally, so the settings actually increase. When you do both of those together, typically you start to remove or add orangey reds. So in this case, I want to remove a lot of the orangey red, and it looks like I'm gonna have to be a bit more aggressive. So I'm gonna do that, increase both of those by let's say 20 points and see if it throws me in the opposite kind of end. Definitely looking for something a bit cooler here, but it's like a purple meets like sunsetty golden kind of thing. It's very interesting. It's very hard to kind of figure out given that it is a special effects film, but I'll show you the scan so you can see what I mean. All right, so I think we're finally getting in the vicinity of what I want. And this time I decided to do 2 smaller test prints just because I think I kind of understand the whole image now. I don't need to see it very large every time. So a small half test print is probably good. And I did 2 different versions. I did one with more aggressive settings and one with less aggressive settings. But both were a pretty big departure from what you see up here. And you can already see the difference. This has that purpley kind of bluey stuff that I was mentioning earlier, whereas this is just blatantly orange or red, whatever you want to call it. So one thing that's happening is that because my settings are so aggressive, meaning I'm filtering a lot of magenta and a lot of yellow, you have to compensate for all that filtration of light by lengthening your exposure time. So I think I'm going to actually change my aperture to one stop more wide open, just to let in more light, and then also I still need to figure out the proper timing. This print is very, very challenging, as you can tell, and I think it's all because of the fact that we're using special effects film. So not only am I having to figure out the color, which actually in this case happens to occupy a very, very long departure from what I'm used to. Once I figure out that color, then I need to compensate for the aggressive filtration by adding even more time. So if you're ever gonna print something that is not very standard, I highly recommend that you get ready for a nice little afternoon or evening or whatever time you're printing, because it's going to be a bit of work to get the colors and then the exposure right. Usually you do the exposure first and then the color, but in this case, I'm kind of doing them both at the same time. It's been fun though so far, and I'm very happy that I'm getting close to where I want to be. So I'm going to do this print again, this one with the more aggressive colors, and basically I'm going to just increase the exposure time even more. But I think this is where I want to be in terms of the color. Once I get closer to that exposure time that looks good, then maybe I'll tweak the colors a bit more. But now I'm going to try to find a good exposure for this as opposed to messing with the colors anymore. Finally. Alright, so it only took me like 2 whole hours of messing around and this many test prints later. But I think I finally nailed it. This special effects film is super, super tricky because it really just disorients you. It kind of takes you out of your usual starting point. And then you have to find a new starting point to then tinker. So good news is we got there. I'm not gonna mess around with any more test prints. There's nothing else to fine tune. I think we've got it good enough for now. So I'm gonna make one big print on the 12x16. And hopefully I don't mess that one up, because if I do, then I'm gonna waste a whole big ass sheet of paper. So let's make that one now.
So that was quite the session, honestly. I didn't know what to expect, but definitely got a little bit more than I bargained for. Nonetheless, I really enjoyed that printing session. I want to show you the real print here because I think it's pretty impressive to look at. First of all, look at how big this thing is compared to the size of my face. And then second of all, I just love the colors in here, honestly. I still get really true colors on some of the clothing and kind of the ambiance, but then you get this really beautiful hazy red and then this really like super cyany blue for the sky. It's just very stylized, and I think adding it to this image where there's dirt bikes and ATVs and it's kind of like, you know, uptown in the hood, is just a really, really interesting way to see the neighborhood. You definitely don't see this color palette typically, especially when you walk around. All right, so that's the video for this week. I really hope you enjoyed watching me print. Don't forget, if you want to learn how to darkroom print at home, go ahead and check out my guide. At least give it a look. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and like the video as well. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe. There's a whole bunch of content here you definitely want to check out. Until the next video, y'all. Peace.